The old watchtower hadn't been used in years. Rust streaked down its sides like weathered scars, and the top window was cracked from the inside. Salt air crept in every winter, and no one ever fixed it. The new base operations were digital now. Drones, satellites, precision optics. But every morning, before the drone team clocked in, there was a man sitting on the bench beneath it. He wore an old windbreaker and a plain cap. Same place, same hour, just after the first flight check but before the clouds burned off. He never looked at anyone, just faced the sky. Notebook on his lap, pencil in hand. They called him different things. Ghost of the tower, fog watcher, that old man with the weather face. Officially, he wasn't on payroll. Nobody quite knew when he started showing up. Some said he was a retired range tech. Others swore he was just someone who wandered back after his clearance expired. But no one stopped him. And no one asked? Across the lot, Avery, a young drone trainee, watched him through the side window of the observation bay. She was prepping a flight plan, calibrating wind speed readings for a training run. She noticed something odd. The man wasn't just watching the sky. He was drawing it, not loosely, not like clouds or shapes. He was charting. Precise lines, directional marks, arcs, crosswinds. She leaned closer. At that moment, the man paused, looked straight toward the window, then back at the sky. Later, during break, someone pointed to the bench. He's still out there? Avery nodded. Does anyone know who he is? Some say he was part of the radar team before we got the new grid. You know how it is, base rats never really leave. One of the others laughed. Maybe he's waiting for the tower to talk back. They all moved on. But Avery didn't laugh. She made a quiet note. Crosswind over tower. Observed by civilian? Recheck drift. That night, the clouds thickened over the coast. And somewhere between frame 6 and frame 7 of the drone footage, something moved that the system didn't register. The AI tagged it as non-significant atmospheric variance. But Avery paused the clip, zoomed in. The shape matched the curve she saw him draw that morning. Almost exactly. The next morning, the sky held a stillness Avery didn't trust. Soft clouds sat too low over the hills. The horizon blurred into gray, and the station barometer blinked yellow. Training ops hadn't been called off yet, but something about the air felt wrong. She walked out early. Coffee in one hand, tablet under her arm. The man was already there. Same bench. Same jacket. A fresh page in his notebook. She didn't mean to speak, but her voice left her before she could stop it. Forecast says clear till 1100. He didn't look up, just kept drawing. Forecast's blind today. She blinked. Sorry? He pointed with his pencil, not to the sky, but to the shoreline trees. The tops were just beginning to sway. Low sweep wind. South pull. It'll catch the drone at 150 feet. How do you? You'll see it lean left. Overcorrect. Then spiral for 4 seconds. He went quiet again. Avery stood there another few seconds, unsure if she'd imagined the whole thing. Back in the control room, she launched the drone. It climbed smooth through the first layer, sensors green. As it hit 150 feet, a sudden tilt registered. Not much, just a minor yaw drift. Auto-stabilizers kicked in. Then, a correction. Too sharp. The drone pulled left, overcompensated right, and for exactly 4 seconds, it spiraled before righting itself again. The AI logged it as non-critical variance. Avery didn't. Later, she passed the bench again. He was still sketching. The spiral was already drawn. A tiny notation beneath it read, 918, surge before return. North settles last. She stared at it. You knew. Still, he didn't look at her. But he did speak. Wind always tells you what it's about to do, if you know how to listen. That night, she stayed late. Pulled old wind pattern logs from the last decade. Started comparing them to atmospheric drift footage. And found notations that matched nothing the current system could detect. But somehow, they matched his sketches. The third day began like the others. Gray light over the tarmac. Coffee steaming in plastic cups. Flight officers murmuring about weather windows and drone rotations. Nothing urgent, nothing broken. Except for Avery's gut. She ran a training pattern just after 0830. Same coastal arc as yesterday, but with a higher climb window. The drone moved clean through ascent. No mechanical issues. No software flags. But when she reviewed the high-altitude footage, there was a flicker. At frame 2437, just a single second, a dark streak crossed the upper clouds, too fast for identification. The AI flagged it as possible avian interference, then dismissed it. She didn't. The movement was curved, intentional, too high for birds, too low for satellites, and too sharp for natural cloud movement. It wasn't noise. It was something. She pulled the still frame, saved it, then grabbed her tablet and went outside. He was there. Of course. Same bench. Same jacket. Notebook open. Avery stopped in front of him, held out the screen. Did you see this? He didn't look. Instead, he flipped the page in his book, showed her what he'd drawn. A spiral arc, long, looping, intersected by a sharp dark line slashing through the cloud cover. Exact angle. Exact curve. Frame 2437, he said quietly. I logged it yesterday. Avery's breath caught. You drew this before the drone even flew. Still, he didn't look at her. That's not the first time the skies held something it wasn't supposed to. What is it? She asked. He finally met her eyes. Just for a moment. It's the pattern before silence. She took the sketch from him gently, hands shaking just enough to notice. Back in the control room, she cross-referenced the trajectory. It didn't line up with anything. But buried deep in the archive, she found a decades-old flight anomaly report. Weather only, no visual confirmation. The path was nearly identical. Filed under Classified, Observer Zulu/Echo North/Handcom only. And at the bottom, Pattern traced by L. Alder, Aerostat Field Team 9, redacted clearance. She stared at the name. L. Alder. The next morning, Avery went straight to command support with the footage and the sketch. She waited outside the office for 20 minutes, her tablet held tight under her arm, the page from his notebook carefully tucked between protective plastic. When the captain finally waved her in, he looked half distracted. Drone error report? No, sir, she said. It's not an error. She laid the image flat, showed the trajectory, then the still frame from the drone, then the sketch, timestamped from before the flight. He raised a brow. That from our system? No, she said. That's from him. The man who sits under the tower. The weather guy. He's not weather. He leaned back, exhaled through his nose. Avery, you're a sharp operator, but don't lose your footing chasing those signatures. We've had enough of that from the old radar crowd. Probably some air anomaly. AI dumped it for a reason. She didn't blink. What if the AI is blind to patterns we never taught it to see? He looked down at the sketch again, then shrugged. Get me something actionable. Otherwise it's just chalk lines in the clouds. She stepped out of the office with heat in her chest. Not anger, more like disappointment wrapped in certainty. She believed what she saw, and she believed what he drew. But it wasn't enough. In the break room later, one of the radar techs caught her staring at the sketch again. He tilted his head. Where'd you get that spiral? She hesitated. Off a notebook. Guy near the old tower. The tech leaned closer, pointed at the corner of the page, where Alder had signed it, small and faded. L.A. You said tower guy? Yeah. The tech went quiet, then stood. Walked to a storage cabinet, pulled out an old hard case, red-tagged for Legacy Archive. Opened it. Inside, a stack of weather and wind logs, handwritten. Marked, Aerostat Field 9, Observer, Lance Alder. He tapped the label. That's not some base drifter, he said. He was on the silent deck detail. Only worked in hand signal ops. They trained to see storms before they formed. Most of those guys went dark after 92. Avery stared down. The name matched. The recon team arrived at 0900. 3 officers. Quiet, efficient, no press presence. Officially, they were just inspecting drone calibration protocols. Unofficially, they were looking for cold patterns, anomalies not caught by radar but reported by ops units up and down the coast. Avery didn't speak during the briefing. She waited. Then, at the very end, she slid the sketch across the table. No introduction. No context. Just the spiral. The timestamp. The name. L.A. The lead officer, Commander Rutledge, picked it up with one gloved hand. At first, his expression didn't change. But then his fingers stopped moving. He held the page longer than necessary. Eyes locked to the curve. He looked up at Avery, slower now. Where did this come from? Someone at the tower, she said carefully. He sits there every morning. No rank. Just draws. Said the pattern came before the silence. Rutledge didn't speak, but one of the younger officers behind him murmured, almost reflexively. Observer 9. The room went still. Rutledge turned to him, sharp, quiet. Then he looked back at Avery. Did he say anything else? He knew about the drone anomaly before I flew the route, she replied. It matched the footage. And it matched a report from Echo North. Rutledge slowly folded the paper and placed it in his jacket, then asked softly, Is he still here? Avery nodded. Every morning. They found Alder back at his usual place, wind brushing the sleeves of his jacket, notebook open, compass resting beside it. He didn't stand when they approached, didn't salute, just turned the page. The spiral again, but this one deeper, wider arcs, a third line added. Rutledge stood in front of him, silent, then said the name. Lance Alder, Echo Deck, Observation 9. For the first time in 3 days, Alder looked directly at someone. Didn't think they'd send recon for cloud drawings, Rutledge replied without smile or ceremony. We didn't. We came because someone finally listened. Alder blinked, once, then closed the notebook. They didn't speak in front of the others. Rutledge and Alder stepped away from the bench, behind the tower's shadow where the wind thinned out and the ground cracked from years of salt and sun. Avery kept her distance, but she watched as Rutledge leaned close and lowered his voice, deferential, not like a man giving orders, but like someone retrieving something buried. Alder didn't answer at first, just rested one hand on the rusted rail of the old tower's base, and looked at the sky the way some men look at grave markers. Then he spoke. It wasn't a system failure. Rutledge said nothing. Alder's voice was even, like he'd practiced keeping it that way. We logged the front moving in, slow, smooth, a good day to fly recon. You were running silent? A nod, hand charted. No uplink, no radar ping, just horizon markers and wind draw. He traced an invisible line in the air with 2 fingers. 15 minutes into sweep 3, it split. The storm? Rutledge asked. The sky. Silence stretched between them. Even the gulls overhead seemed to fall quiet. Alder went on. We saw something break formation inside the clouds. Fast. Higher than our ceiling but bending around it. Pressure dropped. Then came static. I told them not to chase it. They did anyway. And? Tower lost comms. Blackout. No names filed. No retrieval. No wreckage. His eyes didn't move from the horizon. They wrote it off as interference. But you remember. I still draw it. Rutledge slowly reached into his coat, pulled out a faded document, decades old, water-stained, creased hard down the middle. He handed it over. Alder opened it, hands steady. It was his final report, unacknowledged, never logged into the archive. At the bottom, submitted, Observer L. Alder, Field 9. Status, classification withheld. Analyst review suspended. He folded it, didn't react. Then looked back at the young officer nearby. At Avery. She saw it? Rutledge nodded. She saw the sky move, the way you described it. Alder gave a short breath through his nose. Then I can stop drawing it. He wasn't there the next morning. The bench sat empty. No notebook, no compass. Just a clean patch on the seat where the wind hadn't touched. Avery stood alone for a long while. She thought he might come from the side path, the way he usually did, with no sound, no introduction, just presence. But no one came. She almost turned back. Then she saw it. Inside the base of the old tower, where the paint peeled and the vent panel hung loose, a small black weather case rested neatly on the steel step. No lock, no name. But she knew. She opened it slowly. Inside, a notebook. Blank, except for the inside cover. One line, hand-inked. She listened. Beneath it, a full diagram, wind arcs, pressure shifts, sky layers. The same spiral formation from his old sketches, but with one new detail. A 4th line, unfinished, waiting to be drawn. At the bottom, Observer Log, Transfer Initiated A. Rhodes, her name. Not a nickname, not a call sign. Just the truth. She turned the page. There was a folded slip of paper inside, yellowed, torn on one edge. It held 3 words. Watch the silence. That evening, she climbed to the top of the old tower. No one had used the access ladder in years, but the bolts still held. At the top, wind circled sharp around the broken window. She opened the notebook again, turned to a fresh page, and began to draw. The anomaly came 3 days later. Not a big one, just a brief fracture in the cloud grid at 210 meters, too low for satellites, too high for birds. The drone marked it, flagged it, But this time, command didn't wave it off. They called for Avery. She reviewed the footage twice, confirmed the curve, ran it against the old logbook from Lance Alder. The arc matched. So did the compression pressure on the wind sheath. But what made them stop was the overlay. Because in her own notes, hand-drawn now, not digital, she'd already traced the same arc the night before. A predictive curve. She hadn't meant to. It had just come out of her pencil while sitting at the top of the tower. When she brought it to the commander, he didn't laugh, didn't dismiss it, just looked at the sketch for a long moment, then said, "We used to think wind was just noise between signals." He looked up at her. "But maybe it's the first signal." Later that week, the old tower was finally marked in the base registry, not as condemned, but as operational, under a new entry. Observer Post, Rhodes. Avery didn't request the title. But when she climbed the tower now, no one stopped her. And in the flight ops room, they started posting her sky diagrams beside the radar logs, quietly, without ceremony. No speech. No ribbon. Just a new row of data labeled Wind Precursor, Rhodes Pattern. The bench remained below, still empty. But every now and then, a young tech would pass it, and glance at the sky, as if someone was still watching from above. And when the next spiral comes, and the horizon starts to bend, they won't scramble. They'll open the notebook, and listen.